The Fortnite universe does have its laws and rules. Of course, within the realm of loopers, battle buses, and V-Bucks, there are always questions or plot inconsistencies that nobody ever discusses. Officially returning to Chapter 1 could completely flip Fortnite on its head. This is going to be a huge event for OG fans. But what does this actually mean for Fortnite? Would you believe that Chapter 1's return would entirely eradicate Fortnite's original storyline? Yes, that does sound a little unnerving, but if Chapter 1 is coming back, that must mean it is from some kind of alternate universe, changing everything. We can most definitely see this with the remix season of Chapter 2, Fortnite, which were obviously in an alternate universe where Midas never existed, and all the spy chaos was handled by his furry golden king, Midas. What if Kevin the Cube was actually Peter the Sphere? And what if our Glorious 7 were called the Sinister 6 instead? What if, instead of Dr. Doom, our island was under attack by the Joker? Get ready to dive into these wild ideas in our brand new series, Fortnite What If. You've never seen anything like this before. In each episode of What If, we'll flip everything upside down and reimagine how events could have unfolded. Like, what if the meteor never crashed on our island? So, grab your popcorn, tune in, and crank up your imagination, because we're about to dive into a whole new parallel universe. We all know Epic Games officially announced the return of Fortnite's Chapter 1 on December 6th. But naturally, this raises a ton of questions. Not just for you, but for me too. If Chapter 1 is coming back, how will the story events unfold? Will we see repeats of the old events? Collaborations? How are Epic planning to expand on Chapter 1's lore? And what happens when it reaches the final Season 10? What then? Come into this Imaginarium, where I'm here to help untangle this web of universes for you. What if Chapter 1's return comes with a totally different storyline? What if this is a Chapter 1 from an alternate reality or universe, where everything happened differently? And honestly, if Chapter 1 is back, how can the story even move forward when everything is supposed to exist in an endless loop that keeps resetting itself? Why didn't everything just stop on the Chapter 1 map? Or maybe it will? I think the answer is actually right in front of us. We just haven't fully completed the cycle yet. After all, the Fracture event rewound us back to the time before the Imagine Order even existed. Which makes me think, the cyclical nature of Fortnite probably has a completely different meaning than we usually understand. Most likely, the events do repeat, but loopers can influence them from the outside, so the outcome of this cycle isn't set in stone. A perfect analogy for this is the Marvel's television Loki series. If you haven't watched it, you totally should. Loki's fate was supposedly predetermined. He was destined to die at the hands of Thanos. But one of his variants escaped the cycle, and from there, the future kept changing based on his actions. The world of Fortnite could absolutely follow the same logic. Back in Chapter 1, it's likely the story was stuck in a loop. Just look at the bunker drawings from Jonesy. But then, the actions of the Seven pushed that cycle down a completely new path. So, without a doubt, this cycle will end, and a new one will begin. But how we get to that conclusion, that's entirely up to the choices of our main characters. Since we've already mentioned the meteor from Chapter 1 Season 3, the very one that started it all, I think it's only fair to make this rocky friend with the toy inside the first guest of our pilot episode. So, if Chapter 1 is returning and the events are going to play out completely differently, let's imagine wiping out the comet heading toward the island altogether. Alright, let's see how that would have turned out. Wait, hold up. What is this, an encrypted alien message or something? Oh no, that's just my creator code. Punked. Huge thanks for your support. It's mean a world to me. Interesting stuff. But now it's time to figure out what would have happened if the meteor never crashed. So it's Season 4, and instead of a giant crater, the old warehouses are still standing tall, trees are blooming, and newbie loopers are just learning the basics of building. The idea of massive 30-story wooden hotels with all the amenities? Yeah, that's not even a thing yet. Honestly, wrap up 10 seasons like this for me, please. It all sounds pretty perfect, doesn't it? Well, almost. But something feels off, like we're missing something really important. Scratch that. Something incredibly important. Without this something, none of the other seasons, including the current one, would even exist. Of course, I'm talking about the very first member of the Legendary Seven, who we first met after the crash of the cosmic bombshell. Now, some of you younglings are probably scratching your heads, wondering how one character could make or break the next 13 seasons. Saying it out loud almost sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? But trust me, it's not. The Visitor was the spark that ignited the entire Fortnite storyline. If the meteor had never existed, the Visitor couldn't have landed on the island, and the ripple effects of his absence would have been massive. For starters, the imagined order would have just kept experimenting with the loop and its effects on living beings. Sure, they kept doing it anyway, but let's be real. The Seven made sure to light a fire under their seats, and not the cozy kind. Because these guys know how to throw a real chaos party. That's why the IO kept such a close watch on the meteor crash site, to keep tabs on one of their greatest enemies. But here's the thing, they didn't catch him, at least not in the original reality. But in a world where the comet never fell, there wouldn't have been anything to watch in the first place. So in this alternate dimension we're imagining, the IO would have loosened up for a while. No cosmic rocks meant no immediate threat from the Seven. Or so they'd think. Because, let's face it, the Seven aren't the kind of crew to just vanish quietly. So one way or another, the IO would have still had to haul themselves off their chairs to clean up whatever mess the Foundation and his crew stirred up. And since the Visitor never appeared, that villain lair, the one built for filming Carbide and Omega's superhero movie, would have just been sitting there empty. Now, OG fans probably see where I'm going with this, but if you're as familiar with Fortnite lore as I am with Donald Mustard, not at all. Don't worry, I've got you. I'll break it all down and even flip to the exact page you need. Oh, and while you're here, go ahead and hit that mythical like button and subscribe. Because who else is gonna take your random questions, chew them up, and spoon feed you the answers? Anyway, back to the spooky lair where the Visitor in our dimension worked his magic. When I say deeds, I'm talking about building a massive interdimensional rocket. I mean, seriously, where did this guy even get such advanced tech to whip up that beast of a machine in just a few months? Oh, and here's a fun brain teaser for you. How did the Visitor manage to avoid getting caught in the 22-minute loop if, like Thor, he didn't arrive on the island through the 0 point? I've got a few theories myself, but I'd love to hear yours. The author of the best theory, the one with the most likes in the comments, will get an honorary battle pass for the next season in an upcoming chapter. And hey, don't miss your chance. Turn on those notifications so you don't accidentally skip the results video. Alright, time to get those brains working. While you're warming up those gray cells, let's get back to our rockets. But here's the catch. No meteor, no visitor, no rocket. And without the rocket, there'd be no launch at all. Now imagine, what would have happened to the island without that flying contraption? That's just it, nothing! The island would have stayed exactly the same. No giant cracks in the sky shooting purple lightning into the ground. No cracks, no rift. And without the rift, no drift either. This chain of events could go on forever because that tear in the sky was what first showed us that our world wasn't as solid as it seemed. It revealed the gaps between dimensions, gaps the Seven know exactly how to exploit. If we trace the chain from the missing meteor to the non-existent rift, it becomes crystal clear that sometimes the smallest cosmic rock can flip the entire world upside down. It's fascinating to think about how the Fortnite community would have reacted to a game where nothing ever changed. Maybe the Sweats would have loved it, just chopping trees, smashing rocks, and building castles, living the dream. Meanwhile, here we are, bothering you with lore and map changes. But jokes aside, if that fateful rift hadn't opened, we wouldn't have had the cube. One of Fortnite's most iconic symbols, then again, who knows? Maybe the rift would have opened eventually for another reason, and instead of a cube, out would pop a triangle or some weird trapezoid. Let's be honest though, that would have been a serious downgrade from our beloved Kevin. Kevin's journey across the island led us to discover the 0 point, the very heart of Fortnite, and maybe even the entire multiverse. It's what connects thousands upon thousands of dimensions. Now imagine if we'd never found out about it. As we can see, something as seemingly simple as a cosmic rock crashing down can have major consequences. Sometimes, it's the smallest details that hide something incredible, forever changing the way we see the world. For example, why does Jones still exist if reality was reset after the Big Bang? And why wasn't Paradigm erased back then too? This is a really intriguing question, and it doesn't just concern Amy but potentially all loopers, and maybe even Paradigm herself. I've got a few theories about this. The first, and probably the most logical given Epic Games' track record, is that they were simply too lazy to explain this whole situation in detail. And honestly, I get it. It would have been a huge hassle to figure it all out. So the easiest solution? Call it a narrative convenience. Something like Thanos' snap. Some characters got lucky, while others were erased along with the old island. The second explanation is much more interesting. We know the 0 Point has a consciousness, essentially acting as a living entity. It could have deliberately saved us from being erased. After all, the 0 Point couldn't have restored itself without our help. Remember the end of Chapter 1? It's very likely that the Seven were the ones working to restore the Zero reality back then. Epic seems to hint at this because how else would Paradigm know so much about mergers and similar phenomena? It's clear they've done this kind of thing before. Another possibility is a lack of copies of us outside the loop. Those who were inside the loop at the time were likely destroyed, but since loopers are essentially the originals of themselves, they avoided being erased. The same logic could apply to Amy. The return of Chapter 1 undeniably raises a ton of questions. How will its storyline develop, if at all? What's in store for the PvE mode, Save the World? And how does it even tie into OG Fortnite? A couple of years ago, you could have argued that there was some connection. Back then, elements like the cube and characters from Battle Royale appeared in the fight against the storm. And most importantly, events from Battle Royale actually influenced the PvE storyline. Before the finale of Chapter 1, there was even a special campaign dedicated to the apocalypse, but after that, the connection seemed to fade away. And when Epic announced they were ceasing support for Save the World, that was pretty much the final nail in the coffin. Don't get me wrong, there are still some themed events happening there, but as far as a shared storyline goes, you can definitely kiss that goodbye, at least for now. I'm not saying Epic won't revisit this idea in the future, but considering how focused they are on the metaverse these days, the chances seem pretty slim. At this point, Save the World feels like a Walking Dead. Sure, there's new weapons, new heroes, and sometimes even features brought over from Battle Royale. But calling that full support? Not even close. They haven't even updated the graphics there, so any overlap in storylines seems highly unlikely. But let's get back to our multiverse travels. I think Sloane's original plan was to permanently get rid of the 0 Point. After all, the 0 Point was often the main attraction for uninvited guests from other dimensions. The simplest way to solve that problem? Eliminate the root cause. Think about it. Our Zero reality is only connected to the outside world through the 0 Point, which allows for dimensional travel. But here's the kicker. Our island doesn't have any counterparts in other realities, which directly contradicts the whole concept of the multiverse. A multiverse implies countless alternate versions of the same thing. So, what happened? We managed to fracture the 0 Point during the last event, causing a massive explosion that opened up paths to parallel worlds. This might explain things like the Festival World, Fortnite Reload, the Lego Open World, and even Rocket Racing. In short, from that moment on, Fortnite truly became a multiverse. Again, we can draw parallels to Loki. Remember when the sacred timeline was destroyed in Season 1? It splintered into millions of alternate versions of itself, creating endless possibilities for storytelling. And here's the best part. They don't even need to scrap old characters. Those characters could easily exist in other dimensions. For example, Sloane could have never been part of the Imagined Order and instead joined the Seven. Or Jones could take Gino's place. Or Gunnar might have always been Megalodon. The explosion of the 0 Point and the division into countless worlds perfectly explains the current storyline. This opens the door to endless twists, and more importantly, the narrative is no longer tied to the 0 Point. We're finally free from the tired island destruction trope. And that's exactly what we're seeing now. This return to Chapter 2, but it's not the same Chapter 2. It's something entirely different, because it never existed in our reality. It's an alternate remix version created after the 0 Point explosion. We don't yet know what's coming next, or what new modes and worlds we'll encounter. Maybe even something as massive as a Disney World, which could become the biggest collaboration yet. Something like that? We've definitely never seen it in Fortnite before. It's incredible to think that all of this is unfolding in a game that began as a straightforward battle royale. I won't go into every single leak about this mode. If I did, we'd end up with a video that stretches over an hour. So here's the scoop. Starting December 1st, with the launch of Chapter 6, Fortnite is set to transform in ways we've never imagined. It might even deserve the title Fortnite 2. Honestly, I wasn't too excited about Tim Sweeney's vision of turning Fortnite into a metaverse. I feared it might overshadow the story, but after giving it some thought, I see potential. There's this vast playground for creativity, and it looks like Epic isn't planning to abandon the elements that brought them success. The big question is, can they manage it? All these new modes need to be developed and supported, not left to fade away like rocket racing. We can only hope that Epic pays equal attention to both the Chapter 6 map and the returning Chapter 1 map, and their narratives. For now, that remains uncertain, but by the end of Chapter 6's first season, we'll likely have a clearer picture of where things are going. Keep in mind, Donald Mustard's influence shaped the game until the beginning of Chapter 5 Season 2. After that, we began to see Charlie Wen's contributions. So, let's see how Fortnite evolves after this remix season. Here's hoping for the best. As for the upcoming event, it's poised to be the biggest one we've seen in the past year. At the very least, it's bound to catch us off guard. A huge thank you to everyone who watched the video all the way through and left their OG royal like. If you liked this new format video, make sure to leave a comment below. As always, this was your guy Punk. Catch you in the next video, and most importantly, take care of yourselves.